happy to invite, to have Farzan Sharifian with us in Greece, in Thessaloniki, in the department, and in the research group of cognitive linguistics. Let me give you some pieces of information about Professor Sharifian. He holds a chair in cultural linguistics in MONASH University in Australia. He has made significant contributions to the development of cultural linguistics as an interdisciplinary area of research. He has developed both a theoretical and an analytical framework of cultural cognition, cultural conceptualization, which draws on and extends the analytical tools of theoretical advancements in a number of disciplines, including cognitive linguistics, cognitive anthropology, anthropological linguistics, distributed cognition, and cognitive psychology. The theoretical and the analytical frameworks, as well as their applications, contribute in the areas of intercultural communication, cross-cultural pragmatics, second language learning, and political discourse analysis. Professor Sharifian is the founding editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Language and Culture. He's also the series editor of Cultural Linguistics. This is a book series. He's also editor, together with Ning Yu, of Cognitive Linguistic Studies in Cultural Contexts. And he's also president of the Applied Linguistics Association of Australia, to name just few of his activities. Of course, member in editorial boards and advisory boards, etc. Let me just give you an idea of some indicative publications, not papers, but actually books. Since 2007, together with Gary Palmer, Applied Cultural Linguistics, Implications for Second Language Learning and Intercultural Communication. In 2008, Sharifian, Dirven, Yu, Nijmeijer, Culture, Body and Language, Conceptualizations of Internal Body Organs Across Cultures and Languages. Sharifian, 2009, English as an International Language, Perspectives and Pedagogical Issues. Sharifian, 2011, this is a monograph, Cultural Conceptualizations and Language, Theoretical Framework and Applications. Sharifian and Yamarani, 2013, Language and Intercultural Communication in the New Era. Sharifian, 2015, the Routledge Handbook of Language and Culture. And there is one in preparation, Advances in Cultural Linguistics by Springer. So these are some of the activities and the publication. Namely, I gave you the titles to see the extent of his research. So, Farzan, we are listening to you on cultural linguistics and emotion research.
Thank you very much, Professor Henry, both for your kind introduction and for organizing for me this visit and this talk. And I'd like to thank you all for coming to this talk, particularly the head of school. And I hope you take away some new things that would contribute to your own research. It's my great pleasure to be in Thessaloniki, my first time in Greece, and I really enjoy it. In this talk today, I'd like to explore a new framework for the study of emotions from the perspective of cultural linguistics. Well, emotions have been defined as kind of mental reaction, subjective experience, psychological state that involves subjective experience, a physiological response, and a behavioral or expressive response. Emotions have been studied by a wide range of scholars across different disciplines, including linguistics, psychology, anthropology, neuroscience, medicine, history, sociology, computer science, to name a few. For example, in computer science, they look at modeling of emotions in robots, for example, and artificial intelligence. In neuroscience, they look at which parts of the brain are activated when you're happy or you're sad. I don't want to go into details of, which aspects of emotions each of these groups is interested. But it's clear that emotions are very important to all different disciplines in terms of understanding the nature of this complicated human aspect. There are fundamental aspects that define an emotion. I think everybody agrees that there's a biological element into emotions. And sort of emotions are bounded by bodily experiences. They're sort of, we feel them inside the body. We also say that emotions have got a kind of a cognitive element in that they are a cognitive appraisal of a situation. You say, I hate this. So cognitively make a comment on a situation. And of course, a lot of people agree that emotions are created and learned within a particular cultural meaning-making system. So this is a culture coming into the scene. And of course, emotions are constituted within a particular context. And emotions are located within a cultural categorization system. So I'll be elaborating on this a bit more. What I have recently been trying to do is to develop a kind of a framework for studying research and studying emotions from the perspective of cultural linguistics. The analytical framework of cultural linguistics, as I have defined it, includes three major analytical tools: cultural categories, cultural schemas, and cultural metaphors. And so I'd like to see how these three analytical tools relate to the study of emotions. So this is the framework that I have developed recently, and I'm trying to see if it works. Down the bottom, we start with the experience of emotion. Here, we're talking about, something hot touching your skin. It's a kind of what we call sensation. You feel hot. So that's to begin with. The next step, I think, it's what you call raw feelings. Feeling happy, feeling sad. Perhaps that level of feeling could be viewed to be universal. That all human beings, feel sad, feel happy, that kind of thing. The next step is when you categorize this feeling. You give it a name, you give it a linguistic label, and you categorize it. So this is what I call categorization of emotion. You feel something and you call it joy. And this level is definitely not universal. People across different speech communities categorize emotions differently. The next step is when we engage in what I have called cross-domain conceptualization, and saying, okay, you feel anger, but then you try to map this onto a kind of a concrete, perhaps bodily domain, and saying anger is the heat within the body. This is where metaphors come into the scene of you conceptualize emotion in terms of either a body part or something else. as I said, I refer to this stage as cross-domain conceptualization of emotion. And again, definitely this level is not universal. In the 2008 book that Analytical referred to, Culture, Body and Language, we invited a number of scholars to look at how in different languages, for example, heart, liver, and different parts of internal body organs are used to conceptualize emotions. In Indonesian, for example, hati is the liver, which is the seat of emotions. In some Aboriginal languages, it's the belly that is the seat of emotion. So, and of course in English, as we know, it's the heart as conceptualized as the seat of emotion. The next stage is where you start to schematize. You attach cultural significance values to emotions. And I'll give you examples of this later on, where there is a kind of emotions may interact with other cultural systems such as religion, even gender. For example, particular emotions become prototypical of a female across certain speech communities and not male. Male speakers are not supposed to, for example, show a particular emotion. And that's where we have cultural schemas associated with emotions. I've got to say that schematization definitely, again, is not a universal process. And I'll give you examples of that later on. And again, expression and encoding of emotions is, again, definitely not a universal process. Across different languages, people may encode emotions differently, may express emotions differently in terms of intensity, for example. Some languages may show more intense expressions of emotion in the same context as another language. So overall, this is the framework that I have been trying to develop for the study of particular emotions across different languages. Now, I'd like to give you an example of this system from Persian, the other language that I speak. In Persian, there is an emotion cultural category that we call Amma. It's a very significant cultural emotion category. Now, this category overlaps with at least 5 different emotion categories associated with Anglo varieties of English. Qam overlaps with worry, sadness, pain, grief, and sorrow. So you can see what is categorized into one emotion in another language may be categorized into 5 different kinds of emotion. In everyday experience, Qam, and there is another associated concept, we call it Gose, capture a whole range of emotional states that one goes through. From being hurt by what someone has said, to being away from relatives, worrying about children, suffering from the pain of love, to having lost a beloved, death to death, and even having financial difficulties. So all of these range of contexts and situations are associated with this particular emotion category. There are synonyms in Persian that partly overlap with Qam. For example, we have a word called huzn, which is a bit more formal. We have the word wasem, which is not as intense as Qam. We have andu, which is not again as intense. So often you see in a language a range of vocabulary items surrounding a particular emotion. Why do you need so many words to talk about the same emotion or to label the same emotion? Well, one of them might be about degree of formality, one of them might be intensity of emotion, particular contexts. Well, in terms of the meanings of Amma, there is this expression called Kame Yar, or Kame Hijrane, which means pain of the beloved, or pain of being away from the beloved. This is a very complex conceptualization. The pain is in being away from the beloved. And that is love. Love is the distance between you and the beloved. So that suffering is the actual emotion of love. And if you reach your beloved, there is no love. Because you have no suffering and no pain anymore. So it's very interesting. There are poems about it as well. So the underlying conceptualization is absence of the of the beloved as physical pain. We call it pain. Amma as das dardane aziz means the sorrow, the grief that you experience as a result of the loss of a loved one. So you can see a range of different meanings associated with this word. There's this very simple expression, "Ghamgin be nazar mirasi," means you look sad. So sad, from sadness to pain to grief and sorrow, wide range of meanings are associated with Amma. This is a poem by the very famous Persian poet Omar Khayyam, in which he says, "Until when should I worry whether or not I have the wealth, whether or not I will enjoy this life or not? Give me a glass of wine because I don't know whether or not I will take another breath after this one or not." This is the very philosophy of Omar Khayyam, which live in the moment, forget about the past, forget about the future. But in that particular poem, Gham means worries, worrying about whether or not I have wealth. So you can see, from pain to sadness to grief to worry, Gham captures a very wide range of meanings. In terms of cross-domain conceptualization that I talked about, interestingly, Gham is something that you eat. The suffering, the experience of this emotion, you say Gham khordan, meaning you eat Gham. So it's as if Gham is an entity. There's an expression, say, Gham konje delam lune karde, means Gham has made a nest or has built a nest in the corner of my heart. So, as if, Gham is a kind of a bird or animal that occupies a nest in the corner of the heart. And of course, this, again, reflects the conceptualization of heart as the seat of emotion, but also this particular emotion as a kind of a bird or animal that builds a nest in the corner of the house of heart. There's a particular expression that says, Gham konje delam talambar shude, means Gham has piled up in the corner of my heart. So again, it's as if Amma is an entity, an object that piles up in the corner of the chest or the heart. Well, as all of you know, this is one of the central focuses of cultural and cognitive linguistics, how emotions which are abstract are conceptualized in terms of more concrete domains, particularly bodily domains. In terms of the cultural schema of Amma, and this is what I was talking about before, literature on emotion has already identified a link between emotion and religion. For example, Corrigan says religions offer both direct and indirect cues about emotionality to their adherents. I found a statement which is alluded to the prophet, the Muslim prophet Muhammad on the on a website, and I asked one of my Arabic-speaking students to translate it, and it says, as you can see here, if Allah wants to bestow grace upon a man, a worshipper, he would plant sadness in his heart. Indeed, Allah loves every melancholic heart. Alternatively, she says, it means if Allah wills good for a man, a worshipper, he would install a banner of sadness in his heart. Indeed, Allah loves every melancholic heart. So you can see that then a particular emotion, there's religious or spiritual significance is attached to a particular emotion in a particular religion. So there have been also other studies about emotions in Christianity as well. I found another quote from some website that again talks about this association of gham, this particular emotion, and the religion. The translation of this is the statement, and this is the translation. Of course, I don't want to claim any particular knowledge of religion, but people may question the validity of these statements. That's not my concern. My concern is that people do, in all sorts of possible ways, attach spiritual or religious significance to emotions. Now, of course, different people may do it differently. And that's not my concern. The concern is actually that a particular emotion may find religious significance. So the translation of this statement is that there are two kinds of sorrow or grief. Green sorrow cleans and refreshes your heart, and black sorrow leads to aggression and bitterness. The pious people are endowed with green sorrow. Now this is interesting. The metaphor, color metaphor for a particular emotion. Green ones. Of course, in Islam, green is the color of religion. Black is sort of associated with death. So, again, this is very interesting, that although here we're talking about color metaphors, But really, at the end of the day, we're talking about cultural schemas, because we're associating emotions with particular religious values. Now, and gender, this is what I referred to earlier. Well, people in emotion research have already, identified some relationship between social variables such as gender and emotions. For example, Stearns says, because gender is in large measure a cultural construct and varies greatly over time, historical research is central to the determination of the origins and results of particular gender formulas for emotional expression. I find it that in Persian, we often associate with, for example, worrying about members of the family. And of course, whose job is to worry about children? Is it the mother and or the father? I found this very interesting portrait on the website. It says, Mother, the sovereign of Amma. Sort of king or queen of Amma. It's the mother's domain, not the father, or the poor father. Exactly. Often, when you think about images coming from some Middle Eastern countries of people mourning, for example, as a result of loss of lives, often the images are these women, hitting themselves. So this is the prototypical sort of gender image associated with particular emotions. This is from two medical anthropologists who visited Iran some decades ago. They did identify this particular emotion as very complex. And this is what they said. Sadness and grief, pose special problems of understanding for psychological anthropologists or for the student of Iranian society and culture. They have dramatically different meanings and forms of expression in Iranian culture than in our own. A rich vocabulary of Persian and Azeri terms of grief and sadness translate uneasily into English and American culture. Dysphoria in Iranian culture is hardly the lack of happiness or pleasure of the individual, to be overcome by therapy or medical treatment, though it may be the focus of both. It is rather a core effect, the central emotion of religious ritual, an important element of the definition of selfhood, a key quality of a developed and a profound understanding of the social order, and most recently, a symbol of political loyalty. And this is, again, cultural schemas, that emotion even becomes associated with politics, that the prototypical, let's say, pro-government individual is associated with particular emotions, as if you show more of this emotion, you're more religious. And I believe this is common also across other religions as well. And of course, politics. Now, in terms of expressing emotions, in Persian we have a speech event. We call it dard dil, pain of the heart. So people say, let's have a pain of the heart. So you engage in like a chat, but, you you talk about problems, worries, and that kind of thing. Take hours and hours. Every time I call my mom, I hope she won't get to watch this video. You know, she starts by saying, I say, you know, what's the news? Nothing, but, and then for 2 hours she complains about my brother's wife and this and that and this and that. So that's the pain of the heart, which becomes the pain of my ear. This really becomes a kind of emotional space where people can find relief in communicating their, you know, animals. It is actually seen as a virtue to listen and share others' animals. You know, often mothers refer to their daughters as my amhar, the person who eats my am, and that's a good thing. Interestingly, my mother refers to me as my amhar, and then she continues that you are my daughter, which I'm not very impressed about. She changes my gender because of this particular listening to the problems. Of course, I said gender itself is a cultural category. I found this interesting picture on the internet. In Persian it says, love means not reaching, not getting there. And it's a very interesting thing. Love means the face with a pale face. Love means a lot of narrow heart. Love means pain and distance. Love means patience. Love means fear of not reaching your beloved. And love eventually means not reaching the beloved. So the pain, the distance itself is the love, as I said to you. And as I said earlier, expressions of interest is of emotions is another area of relevance to cultural linguistics. So different languages may be associated with different norms regarding how emotions are expressed, for example, in terms of intensity, as I told you. So a typical scenario in Persian, you know, if a child enters the house with a slight head injury, and the mother says, "Oh my God, what's happened to you? May God heal me." So I'm not sure if in English a mother would say, "May God kill me," because of what has happened to you. So this "May God heal me" is a very common expression of interest, of emotion in Persian. Is it in Greek too? Grammatically encoded differently in different languages. In terms of syntax, you know, you might have a language where an emotion comes to you rather than you experience an emotion. As I said in Persian, grief is not something that you go through grief like in English. You actually eat grief. And of course, that has a bearing on how it's encoded linguistically. So, in a particular language, you may have an agent and going through a particular emotion, right? But in another language, there is the experience of emotion is encoded not separately as agent and emotion, but together. Well, conclusion. So I have tried to show that cultural linguistics seems to have a framework for a comprehensive study of emotions across different languages. In particular, cultural linguistics explores the relationship between language and cultural conceptualizations of emotion. And these include at least 3 different stages. One is to identify cultural categorizations of particular emotions. Well, as I have been trying to show, what seems to be categorized in terms of 5 different emotions in English might be categorized in terms of only 1 emotion in Persian. Cross-domain conceptualizations of emotions. This is obviously in cultural metaphors, where there may be linguistic differences in terms of how we cross-domain conceptualize emotions in one language. Romance, romantic love in one of the Aboriginal languages is conceptualized in terms of throat, in English in terms of heart. And of course, I have also tried to show that different languages may be associated with different cultural emotional schemas. Different languages may be associated with different systems of values, norms, and rituals, spiritual significance, gender significance in terms of emotions. Emotions may have some roots in some religions. So going back to the diagram that I showed you earlier, I think this captures what I have been trying to show, that, okay, you've got the experience of sort of raw feelings, if you like, then categorization of emotions could be done through cultural conceptualizations, cross-domain conceptualizations, in terms of bodily terms, schematization of emotions, and eventually encoding and expressing emotions, both linguistically and non-linguistically. So, I think, if you like, if you start with sort of a more universal inclinations here, then you go more towards cultural specific conceptualizations of emotions as you go on. So I'm very much hoping that data from other languages reveal either reject this framework or further show that it's a useful framework for the study of emotions. Thank you very much.